Recording. So today what we're going to be doing is an intro to Flask, and I know some of you guys have already gotten into it, but we're essentially going to start from ground zero here. So the first thing that we need to do when we're running a Flask project, or really any project in Python, is we're going to want to have some kind of what's called a virtual environment. Okay, and I'm going to open up a terminal here. Let me know if this is too small or you can't see it. Is that big enough? Is that all right? Okay, so let's just go. I'll go to my Dojo folder, and then stacks Python, environments. So I have an actual environments folder, and you guys will probably have this as well. And I'm just going to go over how to create a new virtual environment. So we're going to run this command, virtual env, and then -p is going to tell virtual environment what version of Python we want to use. So we want to use Python 3. And then the next argument is just going to be the name of the virtual environment. So we'll just say this is a Flask environment. All right, so it's installing some setup tools, pip, wheel, done. Okay, and you guys who have gotten into Flask, how do we activate this virtual environment? It's what? Call? Okay.
I've tried to do call. It doesn't work for me. I'm on Windows. I do source, and I believe it's the path and activate, but I may not have that completely.
Oh yeah, like the source and the bypass being activate.
Correct. Yeah. So let's. I'm gonna do it on Mac. Follow the instructions for Windows because I'm not positive what it is, but if it's call, then that's probably what you want to do. So we're just going to do source and then the name of the environment. Actually, first, before I do that, let's just list the directories that I have in here. Now I've got this new Flask folder. Okay, so let's do source, and then we'll do Flask, and then bind, and then activate. Oops. Okay, so now we're actually using that virtual environment, and of course we can install different libraries to use within that environment. And how do we do that? You Flaskers, pip install Flask. Okay, so we successfully installed Flask, and we can now use it from within this virtual environment. Now if I want to deactivate this environment, there you go. Now we're no longer using our virtual environment, right? All right, so let's get.
Hey, Marley, can I point something out because it was something that I was missing first. See on the next to the line up from the bottom where it says Flask in parentheses. If you get into your virtual environment, you'll see something like that. It might be above the line. If you don't, it didn't work and you get in. And I was missing that at first, so I just wanted to call that out.
Okay. Thank you.
And the point of the virtual environment is just that you can have different, like, basically folders or something where different packages are installed.
That's actually a good point. Yeah. So normally, now with you guys, you're generally going to use, say, 1 or 2 environments throughout this entire stack. But typically, if you were doing bigger projects that were more long-term, each individual project would have its own virtual environment. So that way it's isolated from everything else. It might be using different versions of certain packages than other projects are using. So that's one reason why you want to have those things isolated, is so that they don't conflict. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new Flask project here. And we'll just say, so I'm going to make dir hello Flask. And then we're going to run code against hello Flask, and that will open up a VS Code window for me. All right, and I like to use the terminal inside VS Code. I know I've kind of shown maybe a couple of you guys this, but if you hold down Control and then the backtick character, you can open up a terminal window in there, which is quite nice. Yeah, really handy, because I don't like having terminal windows in all sorts of different places. I want to have my development stuff all in one spot.
Was control
Control backtick. Yeah, yeah.
But this terminal window does not have a virtual environment, though, is it?
I haven't activated it yet. Yeah, so each time we're going to use our virtual environment, remember the one that I created here, I deactivated it in this particular terminal window, so I'm just going to quit out of here. So I'm going to have to activate it in this window in order to actually use it. All right, so what I'm going to do, I've got my environments in a folder outside, so I'll say source. Oh shoot, you guys probably can't see that, right? Is that there? Okay, so I'm going to go source, and then we'll go outside this folder. Outside the other folder, we'll go inside environments, and then we're going to go Flask, bind, activate. Okay, so now we've again activated our Flask environment, which is going to come in handy because we're going to want to run this project that we're creating right now. So the first thing that I'm going to do is actually create a server.py file, and it doesn't have to be named that. You could call it like app.py. It's totally up to you. Okay, so when I'm going to create a Flask app, what do I first need to do? Anyone? We got it. We have to import it. Yeah, so let's do it like this. From Flask, so this is the library Flask. We want to import this. What does that look like if we're seeing a capital there? What do you think that means, that we're importing Flask with a capital? I think I heard, yeah, class, right? I heard it in there somewhere. Okay, so we're importing this class called Flask, and what we need to do is actually create an app using that particular class. All right, so we are instantiating the class, and we're going to say Flask. We're going to invoke that against this variable called name that we have access to. And actually, before we even get there, let's just print what name is. Do you guys remember what name means? Main?
If your file is directly rendered.
Right, so if I'm running this file directly, what printing name is going to give me back is going to be double underscore main double underscore. However, if I'm not running the file directly, like if I was running it from some other file, say we had imported this file somewhere else, it's going to give me the name of the actual file. Okay, so if I was importing this from somewhere else, I should see server when I print name. All right, let's try to run this real quick. So we'll go Python server.py. And there we go. So we are running it directly. That's why we're actually getting main in there. All right. Now let's get rid of that. So really the only other thing that we need to do to create a server is to actually run the app. Right? So let's go app.run. And then we're going to set this flag debug to true. And what debug is going to do for us is it's going to give us what's called hot reloading. So every time we make a change to our code, it's going to reflect immediately, which is quite nice. We don't want to have to restart the server every time we make a change. And it's also going to give us some more information inside of our terminal that will help us as we continue to build out the app. The other thing that I can specify in here is a port number if I want. Okay, so if I want this to run at 3000, for instance, I can specify that port number. Okay, so let's run it again. Oops. Do I have something already running on that port? Oh yeah, address already in use. So I'm already running something at that port. Let's just change it to like 3003. All right. Okay, cool. So we're actually running our server. Yes, question. What was the what? Hotkey?
Yeah, did you just do something to get it to run? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. It wasn't a hotkey, but when you press the up arrow, it's actually it'll give you the exact thing that you typed last. Yeah. So you can see here that we have our server running here on port 3003. This IP address 127.0.0.1, that is the same as localhost. Okay, so if I do command to follow this, we can actually open it up. Oops, I meant to have that in this other browser. Okay, so if I just open up localhost 3003, okay, not found, right? So we don't even have a route for our home route. Now let's see what that looks like in comparison to if I just enter a bad address somewhere. Oh, that's actually giving me a search, but what if I do? It keeps trying to search. So if I did like some bad url.com. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. Sorry. Just trying to show what would happen is, so if we actually hit a URL that doesn't exist in the World Wide Web, we're going to get a page like this, right? The difference here is that we're getting a 404 response here, and it's saying not found. The requested URL is not found on the server. So this is actually coming from Flask. This is Flask telling us you have not created a route for this specific page. And if we look at our terminal down here, we should see that this route was actually hit. You see how we have that 404 down there? So every time I hit this page, if I refresh it again, I should see another little message here. So 404 again. So we're finding a page that doesn't yet exist. That tells us, hey, you actually need to create a route for this particular page that you're trying to visit. Okay, so after we've created our app, what we need to do is actually establish some routes for that app. So the way that we do that is we're going to say @app, and this looks kind of weird to you guys, probably, maybe. This is called a decorator, okay? And we're applying something to the line that follows it, at least the line that follows it and has code on it, all right? So we're going to say app.route, and then we're going to apply some specific pathing to that. I'm trying to build a home route, so I'm just doing a /, that's it. And then underneath that, what we're going to have is a function that we're going to build that will actually do something when we hit this route. All right, so let's create, we'll just call it an index route. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to print something inside of our terminal. So hit the index route. Okay. So now when we hit this route, we're going to get an error because we didn't actually return anything. So that's fine. Where is my little print statement going to print? Is it going to print here inside this this JavaScript console here? What do you guys think? Terminal, right? Say that again?
Yeah,
Terminal, right. Very good. So did anyone think that it was going to print in my JavaScript console?
I thought about that.
You thought about that? Okay. Yeah, why doesn't it? Because this is not, what we're printing is not happening on the front end of the website. It's actually happening on the server side, in the server. Okay? So if we look back at our logs in here, way up above all of this error stuff, we should find that we actually printed something. Oh, here we go. Hit the index route. Okay? So now we can ensure we're actually hitting that route successfully, so everything's going as expected. The only thing that we didn't do is that we didn't actually return anything. So on the front end, we just get a bunch of errors that don't look so hot to the user. All right, so instead of doing this, let's return something to the web browser. So let's just return hello from Flask. Okay. So we're getting that hot reloading there, and you can see the debugger started up again. Cool. Let's hit it again. Excellent. Now, how easy was that to just create a server with Flask? Incredibly easy, right? Now, if we were writing this ourselves, if we had to write Flask from scratch, how easy would that be? Not so much, right? Now you just kind of get a sense for what the use is in bringing in these external libraries. Is like we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We have all of this built-in functionality inside Flask that we can draw upon to build things that we want to build, which is incredibly nice. So this, oh, was there a question over here?
Yeah, for the localhost situation, you did 3003, and 3000 had already been taken out.
Yeah.
Why did you start at 3000, or can you put localhost 1 or 2 or?
Yeah, no particular reason. I like using 3000 sometimes. You guys don't even have to specify a port. If we do it with no port at all, I believe it'll do 8000 by default. Or 5000 is what it's going to do. Yeah. Yeah, so I was just showing you guys that. It's not super important. You can do all your development on 5000. You know, that'll be fine as well.
Is the server, like the local server, is running your?
On my computer, correct. Yeah, so obviously nobody else outside of you can access this localhost right now. Okay. So what we're sending back right now is just a string of text, and it obviously doesn't look so great. Let's pretty it up a little bit. Let's add an H1 tag there. All right. There we go. So yeah, we can sort of add any tags we want in our string. But let me ask you this. Would it make sense for us to build web pages like this? Like if we had to slam everything in a string, say we'd have our, I don't know, for example, oops, we'd have like an HTML tag, we'd have a head tag,
Can you not just leave
and a head tag.
HTML body in there?
Hold on a second here. Yeah, and then we'd have our body tag and all this stuff, right? And then eventually we're going to enter HTML. Does that seem like an efficient way of writing server-side logic?
I think, is that what you're just saying?
Yeah, no, I was saying like just leave the whole HTML file in there so you don't have to do all that.
There you go. Yeah, so this would be terrible, right? If we actually had to stringify every single thing that we wanted to appear in our output like this, imagine how difficult that would be to read. For you as the developer, you know, you're looking through this and you're parsing strings all over the place, that would be awful. So what Flask has is it has this method that we can, or this function that we can bring in, which allows us to render templates. Okay? And what we need to do is we actually need to create a templates folder so that Flask knows where to pull our templates from. So let's create it. Should be called templates. And then inside of our template, let's just create some kind of, we'll call it index.html. And a really handy thing if you guys are using a text editor or a code editor that has Emmet in it, which is like for autocomplete, I can go like this, and it's just going to fill out all this boilerplate for me. So again, that was an exclamation point, and then I just hit the tab. So I don't need to do any of this HTML boilerplate. Let's change the title here. We'll say hello. We'll call it Flask hello. And then we'll say, hey, people. Okay. So instead of actually returning a string, we're going to change it up, and we're going to say return render template. I'm going to render index.html. And let's try to do this again. Hey, what do you know? We got an error. This is fun. You guys are probably seeing errors all the time in your daily work, so we're kind of getting used to seeing them. What is this telling us? Yeah, render template is not defined, which means that I'm trying to use a function that doesn't even exist in my code at all. So I have not only have I not imported it from somewhere, I also haven't defined it somewhere. If I establish my own render template function in here, then obviously we can use it. But that's going to be a lot of extra work when I have Flask here to do the the bulk of the grunt work for me. So where am I going to get render template from? Flask, right? I'm actually going to bring it from Flask itself.
Why do you have a red underline for that font?
That's because your code editor. Aren't you guys seeing those in your
I don't
code?
have it.
Oh, really? Okay. That's interesting. Are you both on Windows?
Well, I think like every time you save it,
You're
it
on
just
Mac.
disappears. Yeah. Every time you save it, it just comes.
No, the from is not going to disappear.
No, the underline underneath it.
This, well, no, I understand what you're saying. This underline's not going to go away, but my underline under render template will go away because I'm now importing it. However, your code editor doesn't know that you're using a virtual environment. At least this part of the code editor doesn't know that. Your terminal might know, I guess, theoretically.
Yeah, and that happened to me a lot. So like on some of them, where you get into the later stuff, where you actually use curly brackets, I was getting like red underlines all over the place, and like, oh no, there's something wrong, and it was fine. It was Flask. But like what you were saying, Morley, the code reader didn't understand it as such, and it's giving me an error. So don't do what I did and spend 45 minutes wondering why I have an underline.
Yeah, it's just saying it doesn't see Flask in the local folder structure here, because obviously we have it installed in another place in our environments folder. Okay, so if I save this now, we'll see the red underline under render template went away because now we actually have access to it. So if I refresh my page, cool. Now we're actually getting question.
You'd know that render template was in Flask by just like print all of the. You can print Flask and find out all of the built-in functions.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's go print. Oops. So we're not actually importing everything. So let me hold on 1 second. Let's just go import Flask, and then let's print Flask. Module Flask. So that's what it gives us. Doesn't seem like it really gave us what we wanted, right? It's saying that it's a module, yeah. But I think I understand your question. You're kind of wondering, well, how would I know what I can import from Flask, right? And you might also be able to get some in the platform.
Yeah, because they showed us how to find main and main.
Oh, the default variable.
Yeah.
When you create a Python file. But that's different though.
Oh, that was like printing locals or something like that, right? Okay. Yeah, so this would probably be different. Let me see if autocomplete is working on this. So if I do like option, oops, shift option. There's probably a way that autocomplete would be able to help us.
Can you find it in the terminal, like do pip list and stuff?
Whoops. Dang it. Hold on 1 second. Pip list. Well, this is going to give us the actual packages that we've installed, but that wouldn't tell us specifically which functions were available from that. But I'll see if I can check into that actually when we're done.
So maybe just for now, just look it up.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. And if I forget, remind me. All right, we'll try to check it out later. So anyway, we printed Flask. That didn't really do anything for us, but let's keep moving. So again, we've got our page. Whoops, I need to restart the server because we got out of it. Okay. All right, so we got this page. It's not really doing anything. What if we wanted to add some static files to it? Like say we wanted to style it up and make it look a little bit more interesting. Exactly, yeah, we want to import CSS, right? So Flask gives us this way of bringing in static files, and just like how we create this templates folder, we can also create a static folder. And within that static folder, I might have some CSS files. So let's do that, and then we'll actually create something. So we'll go style.css, and then let's just make something super garish and obvious so that we know, okay, for sure our styles are loading. That's exactly what I was going to do. Yeah, so I was just going to say, for our body, let's just say the background is red. All right. Okay. So now inside of our index.html, we're actually going to have to link this CSS file. You guys remember the syntax for linking a style sheet? Link, relic style sheet. Some of you do, some of you don't. It's okay. All right. So what we're going to do is we need to put the actual file in here, but we're going to use what's called mustache syntax. Okay. So Flask uses this template renderer called Jinja under the hood, and that's how we're actually creating our output when we ultimately give something to the browser. It's using Jinja to compile that code for us. So here we're basically generating a file or a file reference to the CSS file that we want to appear. So we're going to use this function that Flask gives us called URL4. Okay, and then URL4 is going to take a couple arguments here. The first argument is what folder are we trying to reference here in grabbing a static file. And then we're going to use a named argument. So we're going to say file name equals, whoops, actually I don't want this, oh, yes, we want it to look like that. Okay, so we're going to say the file name is going to be css/style.css. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about me saying css/style.css? Yeah, so the static is going directly to this static folder, and then I'm getting into a subfolder here, and then going to the actual file.
Can you not put all the index file, like all those files together in one folder and then access that way? For example, like index.html and style.css in the same folder and then access from there.
You mean, can you put your static files or files inside of your templates folder?
Yeah.
No.
And you
No,
can-
because Flask has sort of established this way for us to do things. I mean, it's not super opinionated as far as frameworks go, but it does have some opinions about where we put what things.
So that means like for every single thing we have to create a different folder so like knows where it's going. Whether it's going to be like static templates or something else.
Well, it really depends. If I just had one style.css that I was using throughout my entire project, I don't necessarily need to create a bunch of different style.csses. But if I had some specialized styles that go with a specific page, yeah, I might have to create other CSS files. Just depends what you want to do.
Will you put that in a different static folder? Like, would you make another one more, or you just put it in the same CSS?
No, I would probably put it inside here. So if I had like a different page, for instance, and I wanted to have, I don't know, a user.css, maybe I'd put it in there. Okay. All right, so let's see if we can actually get this static file rocking here. Hey, boom, isn't that nice? So that's pretty much all we need to do in order to get static files going. You could also do the same thing with JavaScript files if you had some JavaScript files for your project as well. So the other thing that we want to, first of all, any questions about that? About just pulling a static file into our page? No?
I've got two questions.
You have two questions.
Answered it. Well, it's basically static and templates. I know that for this last statement, you put in URL for static.
Mhm.
Does it always have to, is static something that there'll be other cases where Flask would be looking for static? I guess like if I wanted to name it super static instead, would that still work? Or is there something behind the scenes, you know, that we always have to put them in static, always have to put
I
them
was
in
tr-
it-
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I tried that last night because I was thinking, maybe I can create a different named folder or whatever, and I don't believe it will work. So if I go
Okay, so
super
it's
static,
super static.
kind of like that name. All right, style.css, and then let's just change. Oops, inside of our index.html, let's say we want super static. And then this time it's just going to be directly. Okay, now let's try to load this. Could not build URL for endpoint super static with values file name. Did you mean static instead?
Oh, wow, really meant to use static.
Right.
Even super static is cool.
Super static. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it was something that I was quite curious about as well. So anyway, stick with static. It's your friend.
Templates. I'm sure the same thing would happen with templates.
Templates, yeah, you would definitely have a problem because if you tried to render something and you didn't have a templates folder, Flask isn't going to know. Flask is not going to know where to look for that file.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when we're adding the CSS file, we're adding that way into the HTML folder, right? Is that right?
Well, we're putting it into the actual HTML file using this mustache syntax. So when we have a double mustache on either side like that, that means we are actually outputting some value to the rendered template. Okay.
What would happen if you just left it as you normally do?
We can probably not read it.
So if I just went, for instance, static? What would that be?
Or just style.css?
Static.css dash style.css. I don't think it would find that. Well, it does. What do you know? All right.
So if you save it, and reload it.
Yeah.
Is it? That makes more sense. Well, I think it's because it's local, right? Like the other way is kind of setting it up so that I can.
Yeah, definitely do it the other way. Even though that works. For one, you're gonna get more practice outputting something to the page with the double mustache syntax, but what, the URL for? You like that?
No, the double mustache.
Oh, the double mustache. Yeah, you guys are gonna learn to love that double mustache. Yeah. So this is all great and everything, but how do we actually give something to the page itself? So that's something that we're probably going to want to do before we render this template in order to make it specific to, say, Tom or Alan. We may want to actually pass in some information about that user or about something that's of interest to them. So let's practice doing that for a second here. So let's just say we have a user, and we want to pass that to the template. And this is how we would do it. We would establish some variable name, and then we could assign it to, let's say we're going to do as a dictionary. So we'll just say first name, Bob, last name Smith. Whoops. Where is Bob Smith anyway? We actually have a Bob Smith in our class. I'm really pumped about that. I don't know why. All right. So here we go. We're passing a user dictionary, and it's going to be called user that we're going to give to our template. Now, that's what I was. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, Bob.
Like, how many times in your life do you actually meet a Bob Smith, right?
Yeah, I was like, who is Bob Smith?
Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay, so so inside of our template, let's actually do something with his first and last name. So we'll say P, and we'll go hello. And then to output his name, again, we're going to use the double mustache syntax. And we're just going to say user, and we'll say first name. So it's the, well, actually, I think we need to do it with brackets here. So we'll go brackets, syntax, first name. Put a little exclamation point there. Let's do this again. Hello, Bob. Let me get this horrible background out of there for you. Yeah, I guess we'll just comment that. All right. There we go. Comment the whole thing. So we refresh it. Hello, Bob. But Bob's not here. Makes me really sad. All right. If we want to output his last name, of course, we can do the very exact same thing. We'll go user last name. Oops. Oh. Yes, you are absolutely right. I didn't close my double mustache. Okay, so yeah, handlebars. Hello, Bob Smith. All right. So this is like the fundamentals of how we're going to render things with Flask. The other thing that we may want to render might be a list of something. So this would be sort of a common occurrence in your assignments, is that you're going to be iterating through some kind of a list. Let's just do something in the template to get ourselves going. Let's say we're rendering a template, or a table of users. Let's see how we can do that. So I'm going to show you guys some shortcuts here that maybe you've seen, maybe you haven't. Go like this, tr, and then we'll say th times 3, and then I'm going to go up 2 levels, t-body. Is this causing trouble for you?
PlayStation cheat code up, down, left, right.
Look at this. Now watch when I press tab, you're going to see magic unfold before your eyes. Oh,
Wow.
isn't that just... All right. So yeah, So these are Emmet autocomplete things. So yeah, you should have Emmet. If you guys are using VS Code, you should have that enabled by default. So it's just kind of like a friendly little note. If you spend a little bit of time getting to know your editor, it'll make some of these things go faster for you. So all right. So let's say we want to output a first name. We'll just call it first, last. And then we want to do email, okay? And then down here we've got some, we've got Bob, who's not here, bob@smith.com. All right, so now I've got my little users table. So that's great. I could hard code it in the template, but that's not really so awesome because I actually want to have some sort of list that I'm passing in from my server. So how do we do that? Same exact way that we passed in user data, only here instead of passing in a bunch of information for one user, let's just create a little list. So we'll say users equals a list. And then for each element of the list, let's have some user information. So let's say first name, Tom. Remind me your last name, Tom?
McNamara just put out.
Yeah, that works. M. Okay, and your email is going to be tom@m.com. Cool. All right, let's get another user in there. William. Billy? Yeah, I like that.
West.
Yeah, we're gonna have like a quick draw contest coming up. All right, and your last name, Billy C. Algae. I like that. Let's go with Algos. Let's do that, Billy Algos. I really like that. You've got a new screen name right there. So we'll say your email address. Fastest algos in the West. Where are you seeing that? Right here? Oh, that's a good question. So I have this extension installed. It's a spelling check extension. So it doesn't like this algo. See, it's an unknown word. Feels threatened. That's right. Now, the spelling extension, I will add, though, kind of comes in handy for certain things because sometimes you do misspell something, and sometimes debugging that is a nightmare. I've had that happen before where the spelling extension will catch me on something, and it's like, oh, thank goodness, because I could have spent a whole bunch of time goofing around with this. So,
what's it called, the spelling?
oh, geez, that's a good question. Probably spelling, but...
VS Code is pretty intuitive. You type in spell check, you'll find something.
Yeah, where is that thing?
I
Oh, here it is. Here. I install every extension that's available. So this is it right here. It's called Code Spell Checker. All right, so if you guys want to add that, go ahead and do it. You're welcome to do so. All right, so here what we're going to do is we're going to pass this list to our template. So I've established our users variable here. And instead of user, let's say users equals the users variable that we just created up here. All right? And then you'll see my underline is going to change here. It was telling me before I wasn't actually using that variable. Now I am. Okay? So inside of my template, how am I going to iterate through my users? Well, I'm going to use these control structures that Jinja gives us. So for each, thank you, for each row, what we're going to do is we're going to do this percent sign, and we're going to say for user in users. And then at the end of that iteration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end my for loop. Okay. And if I wanted to just show that this loop is running, we could just output something each time. Let's just say, actually, no mustache syntax for a second. We'll just go loop ran. All right. So if I refresh this here, oh, you know what? I was still trying to do something with user, wasn't I? Up here. This is the problem. Get rid of that. So yeah, we had another one of those user is not defined because I actually was trying to access something that I hadn't passed to my template. Now we should be okay. Okay, so the loop ran how many times? Why? Because I have two users. Exactly. So instead of doing loop ran, yes, that was excellent. So instead of doing loop ran, let's actually create a row inside of our table every time we loop through another user. So I'm going to go tr, and again I can go td times 3, which means I'm going to have 3 cells. Okay?
I missed the syntax for that, so
Watch the video. It will be available at some point later today. All right, so in the first cell, what we're going to do is we're going to output the user's first name. So again, we're going to open up our double mustache syntax, and we'll say user first name. Remember to close these, because if you don't, Jinja will yell at you. All right, last. Jinja will what?
Ginger.
Ginger. Yeah, we should kind of create that as like a friendly name for Jinja. You know, like old Ginger's getting mad.
She's the redheaded stepchild of the languages.
That's right. That's right. All right, so here we go. Now we're actually outputting first name, last name in email. And let's see if we got that on our screen. Hey, hey. All right. Does this looping syntax make sense to everyone? Okay. So when we use the percent sign, that means we're creating some kind of a control structure in our template. So we could use that if we were doing an if condition, for instance, or if we're looping. If we do the double mustache syntax, that means we're actually outputting something to the template. Okay?
So if you have a for loop and an if statement inside of it, the if statement also has the percentages. You don't just
Correct.
declare it once and then everything in there kind of runs.
Yes, that is correct. So if I wanted to do some kind of an if check inside of my for loop, again, I would do it something like this. And in fact, we'll just do it. So we'll say if true, and then we'll end it here. And if, let's just go, it was true. Okay. So how many times should we see that? Twice, because it's true is always true, right? There you go. It was true. It was true. Okay. So that's how we could nest an if condition inside of a for loop. All right.
So is this how we always create a template in HTML then or what's the purpose of this?
Purpose of what specifically?
This table, like what are we doing right now?
Why are we okay? Well, what I'm showing you guys is how we would loop through a list of something. Now, you wouldn't have to loop through a list inside of a table, but in this case, we're just using a table because we sort of have some tabular data. We've got a first name, a last name, and an email.
I think,
Okay.
were you asking, is this how we should do?
HTML template, like, is this how we write our HTML? We're like, okay, this is where the user's gonna go, blah blah blah, and then if somebody fills in the
Well,
name,
it depends. Yeah, it depends on the assignment. What is the assignment asking for?
So moving forward, a lot of your HTML is going to look like this.
Yeah. So if your assignment is saying, okay, given this list of users or something like that, put in your template a table that just shows their first name and their last name and email, then yeah, you would do it like this.
oh, so we don't have to do like days and over and over and do that. It's just alright.
I'm trying to understand your question a little bit better,
Well,
because
I think
if I get what-
allow me, I think what you're asking is you learned a certain way to make HTML pages, right? Like index.html. I think what you're asking, and there were like certain parameters, like having maybe a CSS file that we were pointing to, and so on. And then we did all the stuff with like moving boxes around or adding things. I think what you're asking is, from this point forward, will we always be using Flask and have to put our index.html or whatever.html into our templates folder and always run Flask with it? And I think what Morley is saying and Joel is saying, it depends on if the assignment itself requires us to do something or can take advantage of Flask, right?
Correct. Yeah. Later on in the stack, we're actually going to be using another framework called Django. So no, you won't always be using Flask to render your stuff in the Python stack. And obviously, you won't be using Flask when you get to the other stacks either. So, but yeah, for at least for the rest of this week and into next week, you're going to be doing things this way. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So for this example, we have a style .css file like locally.
Mm-hmm.
What if I wanted to use like something like Bootstrap and I
Okay.
wanted to use it the CDN way, like instead of download it?
Mhm.
Do I just link the URL?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly the way that you're familiar with it. None of that would change.
So I don't have to do that like double mustache.
No, we're only doing the URL for because this is a local style sheet. If it's something that you're referencing that's somewhere else on the web, just reference it in the regular way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what if we also want to use the Jinja syntax on my like style sheet? Because I wanted to be able to change my style according to users' input, right?
You'd probably want to control that in your template rather than in your style sheet.
Okay.
So like if I wanted, for instance, if I wanted something to have a different style based on maybe an attribute of the user or whatever, we could do that in a simple if condition, you know.
So that'll be inline or internal style sheet.
I mean, it's one of those things where there are different ways that you can do it, but as far as styling something, like for instance, let's just pretend here we wanted to look out for something specific. Class equals, yeah, I could probably run some sort of an if condition in there, right? So if some condition was met, then output something, otherwise output this other thing. Yeah, I mean you can make a
Will we
class.
be able to use any of the double mustache in the style?
Inside your style sheet? Not that I know of.
Okay.
And I don't think you'll hit a point at which it's like you actually want or need to do that. But that's an interesting question. And again, if I remember to check into that for you, I'd like to do so. I don't believe that Jinja is going to do any work in compiling our CSS sheets. I think that it's just going to grab it as is. You won't be able to do any kind of conditional logic in
You
there.
could do conditional like styling in line.
Of course, yeah, and he was sort of asking about that, but I'm just saying it's not going to do any work in compiling your CSS. It's just going to simply reference where that file is. That's it. So yeah, you won't be able to do that. But there are definitely ways around that. I don't think that's necessarily a limitation that's going to cause any problems for you at all. All right. Okay, cool. So the only other thing that we want to touch on today is just dealing with forms, because a lot of the assignments that you guys are going to be doing will be using form inputs, and eventually saving some stuff to the database. I'll just mention real quick, if we were getting this from a database, how would we do it? Because you guys did SQL stuff before the break, right? What's that? Does anyone remember? Anyone? No? Select.
Users. Select all from users.
Do you need a money sign?
Where? Money?
Although
That would be a comment. So if we put not money. I mean, the pound sign would be a comment, but yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so that would be the query if we were just trying to get all of our users. We just say select star from users. And so later on, when we actually add databases into what we're doing, we're going to be retrieving that information before we send it along to the template. Okay?
So if you're using select star with select all from users, does that mean that all of that database information for that user is being cached like locally? And so say for instance you have a ton of information but you're only using the first and last name, is it sending all that stuff to you? But it's just not
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. If you really only need certain fields, do it this way. Yeah, don't grab all, because like, and just for instance, do we need to get a user's password or something? Like, let's say we're getting a list of users so we can display it on the front end of a website. Do we want to display their password? Or even the hash of the password? Not at all, right? Yeah, so there's nothing, you really only want to get what you need. The select all, the star, is just sort of a shorthand to give you everything. All right. Okay, so let's briefly touch on how we would handle form submissions here. So here, I'm going to create inside of my template a basic form. All right. And then we'll just have a label, div label plus input. I wish it didn't do that inline, but it just does for some reason. Okay, so yeah, and you can even do some other fancy stuff too, but so let's just say this is for the first name. Okay, and then this input, the name is going to be first name. Okay, and I'll copy this and go. Actually, I want to show you guys one other thing because I'm kind of pumped about it. Div. It's just these little things that make it fun. So input, and then I can do a type of number. See how it did that type number for me? Is anyone else excited about that? All right, nobody else is excited, but I am. So I don't care if you guys are excited about that. All right.
What's the benefit of that? It's saying that it can only be a number, like you can't put characters, right?
Correct. Yeah. And we're not going to use it this way. I was just kind of showing you guys that. But yeah, when you create a number input, it will create this little like up arrow and down arrow next to the input that you can use to increment the number or decrement the number. I'm going to change this back to text. So this is just going to be a last name field. Created an ID for me. It's kind of handy. All right, first, last, and then we'll do email. And then this one will actually be, oops, last name. And then we'll just do a type of email on this one. Okay, let's make sure we have our form on our page. There it is in all of its glory. So notice here in my form, I'm going to take out the action and take out the method. There was no method to begin with, but what this is going to do if I do not specify an action or a method is it's going to submit that form to the very same page that I'm on. Okay, so if I fill this in, refresh it. Okay, so if I fill it in, it's mine. Whoops, I forgot to create a submit button. Sorry, I always do that. So if you just go button down here, submit. Let's do that. Okay, let's try this again. Oops. Okay, what happened up in our URL bar? Can you guys see that okay? I can't seem to make that any bigger. Well, yeah, you can't see it very well, but actually you'll see all of the information that I submitted is showing up there. So we've got first names, my first name, and the ampersand character, last name equals my last name, and so on. Is this something we would want to have happen when we were, let's say we were registering a user, and that user's, yeah, or if that user's logging in, they're giving us their password or something like that. Do we want that showing up in the URL bar? Not so much. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the method of this form. We'll change a couple things. We're going to change the action, which is going to tell where do we want this request to go when we submit the form. And I'm just going to send it to /users because we're going to add a user. And then our method is going to be a post method. Okay, and when we do a post method, it's actually not going to throw all the information up in the URL bar like that. Okay, let's go here and we'll go again. Oops. Okay, so here we have a not found URL because we sent this post request to /users, but we haven't actually created a route for that yet. So how do we create a route, guys? Yeah, we're going to use this decorator, route, and then we need to specify the path. Okay, and then what we need to do is we need to say the methods that this route will accept, because if we don't include the methods argument, it's automatically just going to accept GET requests, but we're not making a GET request, we're making a POST request. Okay, so let's go POST here, and then we'll create a little method here. So add user, and then we'll just say print trying to add a user. And then actually, let's just redirect. So we're going to redirect back to the page that we were on. All right. And the way that we do that is by returning a redirect to this route. Notice this red line. Why are we getting that?
Because that's what the hyphen is, is that right?
A hyphen, is that what you said? Nope. Any other?
You don't have to.
I have not imported it, right? And I also have not defined it either. So it's not a method that, or it's not a function that I've created. It's a function that Flask gives us access to. Okay, so let's bring in redirect, and we're just going to print this, and then we're going to redirect back to the main route. So let's go back here, something, something, sum at dec.com. Okay, so let's see what happened down here in the terminal. So we got our little print trying to add a user, and then you'll see we actually ended up right back where we started. So we're on the original route, nothing filled in, right? Okay, but that's not so useful because I actually want to get the data that came in from my form. So Flask gives us this other object called request. Yeah.
All the basic stuff. 'Cause
Yeah, yeah, you
assume
can.
All of them are like basic.
Yeah. Yeah, so if we just import Flask itself, then you're going to need to reference these things with dot notation. So the good thing about only pulling out the things that you need is that you don't have all of this extra stuff. Yeah, exactly. You don't have to do that, and also you're keeping the memory footprint of your application down. So we're not bringing in a whole bunch of methods and classes that we don't need. We're just bringing in the things that we want. All right, so let's bring in the request, and then instead of printing trying to add a user, let's print request.form. Okay, so the .form is actually going to be the form data that we're getting in from our request. So we'll go something else sum at sum.com. So we printed it here, and we got this immutable multi-dict. Okay, and that's giving us these key value pairs. So we've got our first name something, our last name something else, our email. That's that. Let's do something else here. We'll actually print some specific values from it. So let's just go first name, copy that down, last name, and then we'll go email. All right, one more time. Okay. So there we go. So we actually got our form values, my first name, last name, and my email address, and then again we just returned a redirect here. One thing I'll add here, and it's kind of stressed in the platform here, is that we don't, when we're receiving a post request from a form, we don't want to render anything directly. So rather than, if I were to render something rather than redirect, what that would open things up to is for double form submissions. So you guys have probably seen this when you're on the web from time to time. You'll click to refresh a page or something like that, and it'll say confirm form submission, or do you want to submit this information again? We don't want that type of issue happening. We want to only accept a submission one time and then send a person to a different page. Okay. Any questions on why that's important?
Not like duplicate data.
Yeah, exactly. Like let's say somebody was adding, or let's say somebody was checking out. They had a bunch of items in their shopping cart, and they clicked to make the payment. We don't want them to pay multiple times for the same group of items. So that's an example.
Let's say we actually wanted to use the information from the request object. When we redirect, do we lose that information?
We'll learn tomorrow how we can save things temporarily for use on the next request. So that's called session. Yeah.
So essentially, like Flask is like kind of like a MySQL where we like put all the information. Is that right? Like the backend.
Well, no, it's quite different because MySQL is simply just a store for all of your data. That's all that is. Flask, on the other hand, allows us to build dynamic web pages for each request that comes in. So if you send me a request and maybe your request has some information to it, like say / whatever your user ID is or something like that, I can then go retrieve your user information from my database and then build up the page to look however I want it to look and then give it back to you. Whereas, the MySQL is just retrieving your data itself. It's not really giving you a way to build a view to see the data, right? It's just giving you some commands that you can go look at. You can go look at what it is, and this is allowing us to build actual web pages where a user can see whatever we want them to see.
And then what if we have to access all the user's information or any data that we want to access? Like where would we get that?
Where would we get it?
Yeah.
It's going to be stored in the database. Ultimately, now here we were just doing it. We were sort of creating something to iterate through locally. But eventually, yeah, we're going to be storing it in a database, and that's where you'll be retrieving it from.
Directly to the database and then it'll just go and store that.
No, before we actually, well, actually, yeah, you're kind of on point there. So if we're actually adding a user, what we would do is we would take this information, and we're probably going to do some validation on it to make sure that it looks the way that we want it to look. And then if it does, then we will send it to the database. The database will add that record. And then we will redirect them back to, well, depending on the assignment or what we're doing, we'll redirect them to some other page. Make sense? All right. Any questions? Yes?
What about something like on your submission page where you want your name to just be up right underneath Tom's name? Like you submit it and then it goes underneath Billy, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How would you do something like that where you're adding to the table?
Well, we're going to do that later. I'm not going to go into that today because it's already been like a really long lecture. But yeah, we will do that eventually. We'll be adding to the database, adding a record to the database, and then on the following request, like when we come back to this page, we're going to be seeing that, oh, hey, a new user's been added. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so quick question for you guys. How many requests were sent? So when we added a user, how many HTTP requests were sent to the server? Ah, why?
One for the first name, one for the last name, one for the email.
No. I like your number though. I like the number 3.
One for the route, one for the return, and I don't know. Post method?
Yes. Okay. So you're very much on point. So there was one request sent to this route. Okay, the actual post request. Then when we redirected, that caused another request to be sent to our index page. And then the tricky one that even I didn't really think about when I was getting ready for this is the style sheet. So when we load up our index route, there's a request being made for that style sheet, right? It's very easy to forget about that, but it's still being requested.
What do you mean with requesting the style?
So remember how our up here we've got this mustache syntax where we're calling this URL_for method or function. Yeah, so this is actually making a request to get this specific file. And if you see on the, if I open up my network tab here, you see how we loaded up that style.css? So that's another request that we're making of the server. You can see all the requests that were made. So we hit that users to add the new user. Then we were redirected here. That was the second request, and then the third one is actually the style sheet. You guys ready to Flask it up today? Are you thirsty? I'm really thirsty. Grab a drink.